Sometimes when a piece of history is so popular, it becomes less of a poignant history lesson and more of a highly curated PR testimonial meant to showcase how awesome your country is. It's kind of inevitable, in fact. In the US, some stories get presented to us pre-packaged with just the nice-looking parts left in, or they're in a weird American vacuum where it can appear that America or Americans are the stars of every production and nothing else really exists outside of that. Then we can point to our American kids and say, aren't you lucky to live in America where someday you too might careen suicidally into the history books? The story of the Wright brothers and the first airplane flight is kind of like that. This is a pivotal and inspiring paradigm shift that's big enough that most people are aware of it, but our general understanding of the whole thing tends to be on the shallow side, and can basically be distilled down to this. A couple of amazing American-born brothers studied how to make an airplane, made an airplane, flew their airplane, and now we all have airplanes. No need to thank us, rest of the world. That's just what Americans do. When we tell this story, it often feels like the Wrights just waved a magic wand and then suddenly human aviation was invented. Their achievement should not be diminished in any way, but understand that they just got to put the shiny capstone atop a pyramid of progress made by many hands. So the question now is, how far back do we want to go? How about this? We can go really far back, but not spend a lot of time there. I'm going to guess that interest in human flight has existed ever since humans saw a bird. People have been kicking around interesting but largely unfeasible flight ideas for thousands of years. Take, for example, the ancient Greek myth of Icarus. The story goes, Icarus and his father, the great inventor Daedalus, were imprisoned in a tower until his father managed to fashion 2 sets of wings made of feathers glued together with wax for them to escape with. Daedalus told Icarus not to fly too close to the sun or the wax on his wings would melt. Spoilers, Icarus forgot, the wax melted, and he drowned in the ocean. While this tale's lasting legacy is that of an allegorical lesson and not a workable flight blueprint, it at least shows an ancient times thought process behind how someone might achieve flight. In the late 1400s, Leonardo da Vinci reined things in a little closer to reality when he sketched out a couple of concepts for human flight. His air screw, a device that had he built it and had it worked, would have operated similarly to a modern-day helicopter. Though I'm guessing without a tail rotor to counter the torque caused from the spinning screw, piloting it would have been similar to flying around in a Gravitron fair ride. Things in the aeronautics world didn't really get serious until Englishman George Cayley entered the picture around 1800. A lifelong enthusiast, Cayley's approach to flight was scientifically based. His research nailed down the critical qualities of flight and the necessary components needed to construct a fixed-wing flying machine. Not only that, but he is credited with the first successful full-scale glider flight, which he had someone else test pilot for him because he is smart. George Cayley's work can be marked as the beginning of the development of practical aviation. On a side note, this was also around the same time as the first hot air balloon flight, which was conducted by the Montgolfier brothers in Paris. So technically that's powered and controlled human flight right there. But I know we're all here to talk about airplanes, so what's next? Otto Lilienthal is what's next. Nicknamed the Flying Man, German guy Otto was in his day world-renowned as the cutting-edge aeronautics guru. After researching the flight abilities of birds, he built over a dozen small but full-scale gliders and personally made hundreds of short flights piloting them. When are we gonna get to the America part? Oh, right now. The Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, a couple of bicycle shop owners from Dayton, Ohio. Their interest in flight was fostered in childhood when they were gifted a toy helicopter, a 1/16 scale model of an Apache Longbow. No, but seriously, what does a toy helicopter look like in the late 1800s? Was it based on a real design concept? Did it fly? I need more information here. Flight was a fun hobby and interest of the Wrights which followed them all the way into adulthood until one day which changed the trajectory of their lives forever. On August 9, 1896, Otto Lilienthal's research career was tragically cut short when he stalled a glider he was piloting and crashed. He died from his injuries the next day. Lilienthal's death is reportedly what inspired the Wrights to seriously delve into developing a flying machine. Yeah, how exactly did that go down?
Brother, have you heard the news? Otto Lilienthal has died in a horrific glider crash. We should start flying in gliders. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I don't know. Either that or they were just sitting around waiting for Otto to single-handedly bring about the advent of flight travel, and when he died, they said, well, guess we're gonna have to do it now. Or maybe they had so much respect for Lilienthal that they took up the torch to finish their aviation hero's unfinished work. Whatever you want, whatever inspires you to careen suicidally into the history books. The Wrights sought to conduct research and contribute to the aviation community, officially requesting data and documents gathered by the Smithsonian Institution. They began building upon Lilienthal's research, noting that a good machine capable of sustained flight would need better stability and control than his small gliders, which were controlled by the pilot shifting his weight. What they came up with was wing warping. I am not going to waste my time struggling to convey the technical engineering behind this breakthrough, but suffice it to say the Wrights figured out that if they rigged both tiers of their biplane design together with cables and struts in such a way they could force the right side or left side wings to flex up or down alternately, which they believed would allow the aircraft to bank right and left on command. Their design theory was more or less proven correct when Wilbur flew a 5-foot wide model like a kite, dubbed the Wright Kite. Yeah, I know, it's real cute. The kite responded accordingly to his inputs, and they were ready to move on to full-scale glider tests. So they had control and stability. What they needed next was the aerodynamics necessary for a machine to escape the ground. The Wrights retooled the convention of the curved wing profile to a more shallow arc that leaned forward. This still gave them the lift they needed, but with increased stability. Lift. It's the force that makes your airplane go up, provided you have enough of it. Luckily, thanks to the compilation of coefficients assembled by Otto Lilienthal, the trick to figuring out if their glider design would become airborne was as simple as plugging variables into an equation. With cloth stretched over a wooden skeleton 17 feet wide and 11 feet long, it was time to go to Kitty Hawk. This small fishing village in the Outer Banks of North Carolina provided them with the necessary open space and strong winds for testing their glider. Preliminary tests had them hooking the Wright glider up to ropes to fly it like a giant kite. When Wilbur finally stepped in to pilot, he laid on his stomach on the lower wing, controlling the wing warping with a foot bar and the elevator with a hand bar. With enough wind, the glider could actually be launched by hand by a brother standing by on the ground. The Kitty Hawk test provided valuable data and experience, but unfortunately the craft produced much less lift than they had predicted. The brothers came back to Kitty Hawk a year later with a giant glider. Although they were able to fly it the length of a football field, it still had a lot of problems. Not only did it have even worse lift issues than its predecessor, it also had worse control. Maybe that lift equation wasn't so simple. Frustrated and confused at their mixed results, they became suspicious of the coefficients in Lilienthal's list. After conducting a little posthumous peer review, they found that the numbers were off. Sure enough, Lilienthal and/or his sources had screwed up. Thanks for the lies, Otto. Now realizing that they weren't as far in the development process as they thought they were, they took a few steps backward and built themselves a wind tunnel, where they could quickly and efficiently test scale model wing designs until they got it right. They eventually found that it was engineer John Smeal's incorrect air density value which threw off Otto's and by extension their own calculations. Alright Otto, but you watch yourself. With fresh data, they returned to full-scale glider tests at Kitty Hawk. They flew their newest build like a kite, they flew it like a glider, and after a few tweaks to the rudder controls, they had a near-perfect controllable glider, which flew twice the distance of their last one. Now it was time to add the final component, propulsion. It's worth noting that without the invention of the internal combustion engine, this is where the story would end. They shopped around for gas engines, but nobody could manufacture one that met their specifications. So once again, the Wrights had to invent their own tools. This is why they say that necessity is the mother of invention, even though in this case the invention is the necessity. They strapped a homemade 4-cylinder, 12-horsepower gas engine into the new body of a craft they called the Flyer. This thing was 40 feet wide and 21 feet long. Adding the engine meant adding more weight. Adding more weight meant adding bigger wings. In the most bicycle-looking feature on the Flyer, they hooked up 2 oppositely spinning propellers driven by chains on gears. Unlike the gliders, the heavy Flyer had to take off with speed to become airborne. You know, like an airplane. Their solution was to have the craft roll down nestled on a cart guided by wooden rails. On their first attempt at powered flight, they decided the pilot on a coin flip, sensing that success was knocking at the door and someone was going to be remembered as the pilot when they answered. Wilbur won. Upon his takeoff, the Flyer lifted, stalled, and crashed, causing minor damage to the elevator. Nice one, Wilbur. With a repaired Flyer 3 days later, on December 17, 1903, they finally did it. The flight only lasted 12 seconds and went 120 feet, but with Orville in the Flyer, they achieved the world's first airplane flight. Their best flight of the day clocked in at 59 seconds at a distance of 852 feet, laying to rest any doubts that this was anything but sustained controlled flight. They were masters of the air, as long as there wasn't a sudden downdraft or an unusually tall shrub in the way, but masters of the air nonetheless. Shortly after their success, the unmanned Flyer was wrecked by a gust of wind which took it tumbling down the beach. But now that they knew all of the basics, it was just a matter of fine-tuning until they got a well-polished aircraft of practical application and they could sell their invention. They did that, they got patents, they went to Europe, impressed a lot of people, became celebrities, met with royalty. Sounds interesting, but I'm not going to talk about it. Why? Because I was only here for the America stuff. What?